Hello, everyone, and welcome to Module 7. This is a review module where we are putting it all together and preparing to succeed on Assignment 5, which also means success on Assignment 7. So let's get started. First, we're going to review skills from Assignment 5, Part 1, because that's going to repeat those skills on Assignment 7, and you're also going to have to get uh, the answers from Assignment 5, Part 1 to help you through Part 2. So the first thing I'd like you to do is open the learning exercise because we're going to go over part A together. And once you do that, um, you'll see that part A of the learning exercise is just a repeat of your assignment. So we're going to go over what specific legal issue you've been asked to research, what the broad subject topic is that you are dealing with in this scenario. Are you dealing with a state law, federal law, or both? Which courts are going to be mandatory binding? And what are some potential keywords you can use? So which part of the research process are we dealing with these set of questions? That's the research plan. Now, I didn't ask you to do a complete research plan for this assignment. I just wanted to get to, the heart of the new skills that we're learning, but don't worry, we will return to complete research plans very soon. That said, we're going to do a short one this time. So we're going to pull the answers to our research plan from the scenario. So first, we're going to look at paragraphs 1 and 2. And we're going to begin with a jurisdiction hint. So LA County is our jurisdiction. So we know that that means we're in California. We're going to be dealing with either California state law, in which case California Court of Appeals and California Supreme Court are going to be binding, or if it's federal legal issue and we're in LA County, then the Ninth Circuit and SCOTUS are going to be binding. So we've narrowed it that much, but let's keep going to learn a little bit more. All right, some more background in this paragraph before we get to paragraph 2, where we have some good factual keywords, odor and noise. So I've highlighted those. And here's where you're going to start training your brain to think like a lawyer. So you hear a story, your brain is going to identify legal issues in that story. What is the legal topic that we have here? I'm starting to think tort. So a tort is a civil wrong. It's an injury to person or property, and those injured parties can seek compensation. So these homeowners have property that is injured by the chicken's odor and noise. But property owners also has me thinking about property or real property as a legal topic. So I've got those swirling around in my thinking like a lawyer brain. And we go on and we learn that most of the owners in the homeowners association are affected, not just Paul and Dan O, but most of the 25 homeowners can't enjoy their property. So are we thinking class action or I think here is where the public nuisance part comes in. Are the chickens harming the general public? Do 25 homes in an HOA constitute the public? And let's see, we are also learning that the desired remedy might be related to this. What do the plaintiffs or potential plaintiffs want here? What they want is for the chicken raisers to stop chicken raising, right? It seems that they want an injunction. Maybe more so than monetary damages, since it seems like the goal is to make the Johnson's chickens go away. And that's a remedy in equity, which is another broad legal subject. So my lawyer brain is thinking torts, maybe property, maybe equity now as well. But I keep reading, we've got paragraph 3 coming up. Finally, paragraph 3 is your legal issue for research. The private nuisance brief is already done. That's off the table. And your issue, you can just grab this entire quote directly from the scenario, grab the whole thing. Your legal issue is whether Paul, on behalf of the HOA, can bring a public nuisance claim against the Johnsons, specifically due to the continuous odor and noise disturbance from the chickens. And there's also, finally, a little hint here. Maybe we consider that a freebie in our research plan to separate anything that you might find about government actors suing for nuisance from private actors or otherwise abating a nuisance from private actor, distinguishing that from private actors suing for nuisance. And we'll learn things like a municipality, like a city, a government actor in that sense, can intervene to correct a nuisance. And that's often the way that public nuisances are remedied. But a private actor swooping in like Paul to protect the public is more rare. And there's going to be stuff we have to learn about how he can go about doing that or not. All right. So do not research private nuisance in detail. That brief is already prepared. Your assignment is, oops, that's not right. That's not your assignment. That's from an old assignment. Okay. We've already covered what your assignment is, though. So looking at your research plan, a legal issue, whether Paul, here we are, on behalf of the HOA can bring a public nuisance claim against the Johnsons, specifically due to the continuous odor and noise disturbance from the chickens. Not private nuisance. Your legal subject topic is going to be tort, maybe, or property or equity, not criminal law. That's going to come up a lot, I think. And how would you know that if you weren't me and already dealing with this issue over the last several years? Don't worry, I'll tell you. Next, what jurisdiction are we dealing with? California state law, because tort is state law, and we're probably dealing with tort here. Not federal law. The binding courts are going to be California Court of Appeals and California Supreme Court because those are binding on state law issues. And our keywords, we're going to be the obvious ones here that I hope you plucked out are public nuisance, potentially in quotes so that we don't get nuisance by itself, which will bring us a lot of private nuisance stuff. So maybe that in quotes, and then odor and noise. I think these were the easiest keywords to grab, but perhaps you also picked up on property because nuisance related to property is what our facts are dealing with. Homeowners, we're dealing with, maybe an HOA, maybe there's other cases about HOAs, and then private actor from that hint at the bottom about government versus private actor. And then you can add more keywords when you learn more. All right, another question though, but Professor, how do I know it's California state law? How do I know it's torts or property or equity? I want to teach you about something I call pre-research. It's what you do to fill out your research plan before you dive into research. So we're still technically in the research plan section of the research process, but we're going to conduct some pre-research. All right, so if you're stuck on things like this in your research plan, you can't finish your plan with confidence because you don't know some of these things for sure or for mostly sure. Try some pre-research so that you can completely fill out that plan. Ask yourself, what's my jurisdiction? What area of law is involved? How much do I know? How much do I need to know? You need all of these answers before you can select a secondary source, before you can move out of the planning stage into the research stage. So if you don't know these things, it's hard to move out of that stage. If you're not sure, is it California? Is it federal? Is it torts, property, or equity? What's your instinct? Probably to Google it. But I have a better idea. It's similar, but better. You can try pre-research spaghetti. I asked AI to create an image of a lawyer throwing spaghetti at the wall, and eventually I got this image. But I didn't invent the idea of throwing spaghetti against a wall. Where does that idea come from? Allegedly, if you are cooking spaghetti, you can test the noodles for doneness by throwing one against the wall to see if it sticks. If the noodle sticks to the wall, then it's done. But unfortunately, that trick is a myth. It's been debunked. All boiled pasta will stick to the wall, whether it's undercooked, perfectly done, or overcooked. Unfortunately, that's true, but we do have the phrase in our lexicon anyway, and I'm using it here to talk about your ideas for legal research. Throw out an idea, see if it sticks. So here it means if we're not sure about a section of our research plan, an idea in our research plan, we can throw it against the wall to see if that idea sticks before we start to research. It's pre-research. What exactly is this wall we're throwing it at, right? If I said it's not Google, then what are we throwing our ideas up against to see if they're any good? And how do you know if the idea stuck to the wall? So the wall is actually a bunch of secondary sources. You can throw your ideas up against the Google wall. That might seem comfortable and familiar, but there's all kinds of rabbit holes to go down there, not to mention the dubious authority that some sources have on the open web. So you're trying to save time, not waste it with a bunch of the question marks that you'll find on Google. So secondary sources are available to you. And they're more reliable than Google. So choose them over Google for your wall if you can afford to jump into Westlaw or Lexis to do that. So we're going to open up secondary sources in Lexis to test out an idea. Let's test out the idea that public nuisance is a California state law issue. And at the same time, we're going to try to figure out what legal topic it is. So we're going to start with treatises and guides to build our wall. We don't want law reviews in there, so we're just going to select treatises and guides. And then we're going to select California to test that out. This is all in the name of finishing our research plan. Remember, we're not actually starting our research. It's pre-research spaghetti, which is why I have our spaghetti icon up there on the slides. So we're testing out California here. And we've got our California treatises and guides as our wall. So let's fling some spaghetti at the wall. Let's try our search terms in quotes so that we don't get private nuisance. And we're flinging our idea against a lot of sources here. There's a lot of treatises and guides on California law. We're going to see which one sticks. The list keeps going and going, but let's see what we've got. Our first results against this wall are from California torts. So my instinct that this is a torts issue is playing out nicely so far. But what else do we have here? We've got fires and protection, which is kind of off the wall. We've got environmental law and land use. We've got real estate, which is property, real property. And then we've got just a very general source that's not topic specific at all. So remember, this is pre-research. We don't have to click into any of these. And in fact, that could turn into a rabbit hole. We haven't actually started researching yet. We're just getting our ducks in a row and I'm mixing metaphors now. So let's go back to throwing spaghetti. What have we learned through this quick little exercise? Well, we've learned that public nuisance comes up in all sorts of legal topics and that it does seem to be a California state issue. And I do think that torts seems to fit best with our factual scenario. So I'm going to add torts to my research plan and I'm going to try spaghetti in Westlaw really quick just to see what we get there, see if it's any different than in Lexis. So here we are, pre-research spaghetti in Lexis. I'm going to open up secondary sources in Westlaw to test the idea that our public nuisance issue is a California state law issue. And so I'm going to select California. And then there are 212 California secondary sources, but lots of law reviews, if you'll see here. So we don't want law reviews in this class. So let's filter them out by using publication type. And we're going to select jurisprudence and encyclopedias and texts and treatises. That way we don't have any law reviews and journals in our results. So I'm going to click apply. And then we've got 96 now, 96 California secondary sources as our wall. There's no law reviews in there. So let's fling our first spaghetti. We're going to put our search terms in quotes so that we don't get private nuisance. And are we going to click on these helpful suggestions? We could. I mean, we're just flinging spaghetti at this point, right? We haven't started research yet. So we could click around in here and see if any of these are helpful to us, but I don't recommend it. Are any of these clues helpful? Not really. So what if we change the suggestions to secondary sources and see if there's anything helpful in there? So secondary sources does have a few clues. It's recommending torts and restitution, but I'm paused here, like with spaghetti in my hand, ready to throw. I want to see what happens. So let's stop messing around with these pull down suggestions and let's just click this orange button to see what our spaghetti does. All right. Whoa, we've got insurance and we've got criminal law. Those are totally different than Lexis gave us. What else? We've got more criminal law. We've got real property again popping up. We've got CalJur, which puts nuisance in its own category. And I'm starting to see why, because it's hard to pin down what other category to give it. So let's see. Next one is an injunction. So that's equity. We've got, Witkin puts it in equity, more equity, and then another criminal again. So we learned some stuff that can help us finish our research plan and select an appropriate secondary source. What did we learn? That we're dealing with California state law, that I still think torts is our most likely broad subject, but it could also be property, could also be equity. And how much else do I know? I know only what my supervisor told me. I think that's all I know about public nuisance. And I need to know everything you need to establish to state a cause of action for public nuisance. That's a lot. I need to know the basics. So I'm going to remove the spaghetti reminder from our slides because we're leaving that phase and we're heading into the actual start to our research process. But before we do that, we're going to finalize our research plan, at least for now, until we can add more details in later. Have we consulted secondary sources yet? Sort of, but it was pre-research to fill gaps in our research plan. And now that those gaps are filled in, we're ready to choose a secondary source and actually start research now. So here's what we can fill in for our learning exercise. The specific legal issue, quote directly from that paragraph in the scenario. Our broad subject or legal topics, I think torts seems most likely, but a lot of others could be involved too. After I did some spaghetti, real estate and equity could apply with our facts. Criminal comes up a lot, but that's not addressing our specific legal issue as we stated it up here. So we may need to filter criminal out if we get too much noise in that direction. Just something to keep in mind. Are we dealing with a state law issue? Yes, state law issue, California. What courts are going to be mandatory or binding? These two courts. And then some potential keywords that we already talked about. So we're ready to consult secondary sources officially and to locate some primary authority. So which secondary source do we want? Let's review the information we need to decide that. We're using California state law, torts, maybe property, and we're starting at the beginning of our knowledge journey. So here are the topics available in Westlaw. I see our topics here, torts and real property. Here are the topics on Lexis, torts and real property are there as well. And on the library's secondary sources guide, we've got torts and property there too. So we can start selecting our secondary source from any of those three places. And here is a slide just to pull everything we talked about in that process together for you in one place. A few final thoughts. If your source, you've selected one, you're diving in, if it seems unclear or overwhelming, here's what to do. Start with or go back to a legal encyclopedia. Perhaps you dove in too deep and you need to start more shallow. Get a bigger picture and context, see where your legal issue fits in. Then, intros and outlines help. So look at the table of contents for your secondary source if it seems overwhelming, because that table of contents can double as a quick outline. You can get an idea of the sort of layout and organization of a topic. Go to the beginning and look for a general section or an overview section and read it. Don't skip over that. It'll help you sort of set your mind on the right path to dive into the more relevant sections that come after the generally section. And finally, try another source and another one until you find something that works for you. All right, we are ready for the next section of our learning exercise, Part B. And I'd like to do that part with you together as well, just like we did Part A together. So in that part, we are being told to head over to Calger, where we're going to look for information on public nuisance and what must be established to state a cause of action. So join me in the next video where we can log on to Westlaw together and see how a search of Calger might go. I will see you there.